Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us in person in Levine Hall and online. So I know we have about 50 online attendees for our second installment of the Academic Innovation Speaker Series. This series brings together members of the Penn engineering community, thought leaders, and academic innovators who continue to impact the future of higher education in many ways across many different spaces. Today, we're very excited to welcome John Katzman as our guest speaker, who will be hosted by Richard Foreman. Our host, Richard Foreman, serves as the chair of the Penn Engineering's Board for Online Engineering Education, and is a Penn graduate who has built a robust entrepreneurial portfolio. He's the managing partner of the Health Venture Group, LLC, a private investment company focused on technology and consumer-related healthcare investments. We're excited he has joined us in this conversation. Joining Richard is our second Academic Innovation Speaker Series guest speaker, John Katzman. John Katzman is a pioneering force in education technology, renowned for founding and leading 3 transformative companies that have reshaped how students access and experience learning. He began his journey in 1981 by launching the Princeton Review, a company that has revolutionized test preparation and college admissions guidance, eventually serving over half of the US college applicants each year. In 2008, he founded 2U, partnering with top-tier universities to deliver high-quality online degree programs. Currently, as CEO of Noodle, Katzman is redefining the online program management model by offering universities more transparent, cost-effective, and flexible solutions to expand their digital offerings. We're incredibly fortunate to have both Richard and John here to share their perspectives on academic innovations as we look back on where we have been and looking forward to where we're going. Please join me in warmly welcoming John Katzman and Richard Foreman.
So you know the challenges that higher ed faces right now. So I don't need to spend much time talking about the regulatory environment, the birth dearth, and its implications even on elite schools, the climate on campus, and the cost problem. What we should talk about instead are the solutions. And I took this invitation as a chance just to talk about sort of how innovation and technology might solve those problems for a school like Penn. But although I have notes, I would be delighted to take questions and comments as we go if I say something particularly brilliant or more likely the reverse. So the first question to me is cost. And I should note that some part of the cost problem in higher ed is perceptual. This is the net tuition over the past 20 years for colleges. In other words, forget the sticker price. What schools have been doing increasingly is price segmenting, right? And every other industry, everybody does it too. When you take a flight, everyone on that plane is paying a different price for their seat. The difference is that higher ed talks about the most expensive seat and everybody else talks about the least expensive seat. You've never seen an ad, even for a luxury good, prices starting at $79,000. It's never prices up to whatever. So we have created this problem, not by price segmenting, but just by talking about it wrong. But at the same time, there is a problem, especially at Penn. What this school spends per undergraduate residential student over their 4 years here is $800,000. That's a lot. And when you look at it, instruction is about 20%, which is the norm for higher ed. Student services and academic support plus administration is about 35%. That number has gone up remarkably And that's where that's where the real cost problem in higher ed is. And in fact, one kind of cool fact is that if we took, adjusted by inflation, if we took academic support and student services back down to 2005, we could take net tuition down to $15,000 at Penn. So maybe academic student services and academic support are so much better than they ever were here that it's worth making this place so expensive. But I would argue that that is a huge target, a huge opportunity for the university, and that's where technology really is at its best. I would say also, though, that I've talked to at least 24 university presidents and provosts in the past 6 months, pointing out their numbers and diving into it with them. And to a person, they were all like, yeah, let's talk about something else. Because you don't get your name on a building by cutting the cost of student services and academic support. Like, that's just not anybody's priority, but I think it's gonna be. You know, it's more, though, than just a cost savings. In real life, you expect technology to work in certain kinds of ways. You expect services to work in certain kinds of ways. Back in the day, when you wanted to know where your box was at FedEx, you called them and read them a 16-digit code, and then they would tell you, oh, your box is, going to be delivered today. Now, you can see the truck as it's approaching you. And if you think about it, that's saving FedEx tens of millions of dollars a year in the people that they don't have to have sitting on the telephone, and it's way better for you. And there are examples like that across every sector of things that are now self-serve. ATMs originally, you had to pay more to use the teller because Citibank was trying to get you to use the ATM because it was less expensive. Now we all gladly pay more to use the ATM than to go inside and use the teller because it's such a time savings and so much easier. So self-serve is to everybody's advantage. There's also the use of AI and technology. This is a course that we built for a group called Citizens and Scholars. It's formerly the Woodrow Wilson Foundation, and it's teaching incoming freshmen, and it's going to be betaed on a bunch of college campuses this fall or summer. It's at like 150 schools. And the idea is that the way to teach people debate, like good constructive debate, is each module is a minute of video. Here's something to try, followed by a debate with a bot, followed by a coach bot coming on and critiquing your words, your gestures, and your voice. And then you sort of rinse and repeat as you walk through the curriculum. It's an hour-long course. But the notion of a course that is entirely driven by AI, as opposed to, well, we could use it to make courses a little cheaper or to get rid of some TAs, is, I think, where the world is going. There's making courses more interactive, I think, is totally doable. When you talk about the use of technology for student services and academic support, a lot of people talk about privacy concerns. And I just want to note that the TSA, after 9/11, they introduced these scanners, the backscatter scanners, and it showed you naked to the TSA guy. And everybody had a problem with it. And then they introduced a very thin layer of AI, which just shows the guy a chalk figure of a person with a yellow square saying, pat them down here. And now nobody has a problem with it. You're still naked, but now you're naked to the machine, not to the person. In the same way, if student services, if you got, for instance, an email or a text every Monday morning saying, hey, Jill, nice job on that quiz. I'm a little worried about the calculus grades and performance. Do you want me to hook you up with a tutor? And by the way, tuition's due on Thursday, and there's that student disciplinary problem that you really need to address. Like, had a 360 view of you, but didn't share it with your folks and didn't share it with any faculty, just it's between you and the bot on an ongoing basis. And when you finally said, hey, I'm thinking of majoring in this or switching majors or switching schools, could actually talk to you about the cost of doing that and the pathway to doing it. Penn spends something like, this is rough, $40,000 a year on advisement per student. Like, could we save some of that by making it upfront? That's one example. Financial aid. We can talk to students about the sticker price, though God knows why you would. But what we can do much more easily is long before you apply, because it's all driven by algorithms. You can just get on as a parent. You know, when the kids gone to sleep and it's 11 and you're saying, well, how much does it cost to go here? Long before you apply. And actually show them a picture of your 1040, show them your grades, and not an estimate. You could just get, if you apply in the next month in a binding way, this is your 4-year tuition. You could take all of this, all the noise, all the effort, all the anxiety down by a lot while saving a tremendous amount of money. Penn does not spend this much. Davidson, their average student who gets financial aid graduates with $25,000 of debt. The cost of packaging that aid is $5,000 over the 4 years. So 20% of the debt that Davidson students walk away with was simply the cost of figuring out how much to give them. That's bonkers in 2025. So the way you think about AI should be in each silo of student services, there is self-serve where possible. Behind that, there's a team, and you still need a team, just a less expensive team. And then sitting on top of it are the kind of bots that might help a student on an ongoing basis, really helping get a 360 view of what's going on and answering questions and pointing them to the right department as necessary. And this, people are starting to mess around with it, but I'm telling you, the money's out there. The second strategy to use innovation is the lifelong learning market. This is $100 billion in the US, growing at 10 to 15% a year. This is a big market. And people think of it as alt-cert. It is not alt at all. Everybody doing these programs has their degree, or everybody graduating or finishing these programs has their degree. It's extended cert. And it's a simple observation that what you learn here by the time you're 21 is not going to get you through to retirement. And that's okay. So the question is, if all of these students are spending all of this money, all these learners, these lifelong learners, generally they liked the school they went to. Generally, universities have the expertise and the brands and the reach collectively. Collectively, though, universities have a 1% market share in lifelong learning. We are not even in the game. And the question is why? And the answer is, even Penn does not have a global or national sales force. This is largely a B2B market, selling into corporations. And nobody else does either. So you're selling into just your alumni and to local corporations, which is a pretty small TAM. And the problem with that is, how much can you invest in the courses you do? Because you're not servicing globally, you're servicing Philadelphia or Pennsylvania. So going it alone is really hard. Further, if you get on a platform, that platform, you think of it as a marketplace, but it's not. Things like Coursera and edX, those are publishers. The relationship with the customer is theirs, and they have been steadily commoditizing universities for the past decade. So you can't get on a platform, that's not helpful. You can't go it alone, and that's why we are where we are. The answer is collaboration at scale. The answer is a federated network. And if every university, and Shopify, by the way, does this in a different area, if every university says, look, here are my non-degree courses, I'm comfortable with other universities, and I can pick which ones, putting those courses on their platform. And they still read as Penn engineering courses. By the way, my dad went to Penn engineering, so I am a huge fan of this particular school. And I was on the board of advisors or counselors of the ed school. So I say all this with love. But imagine you could say, I'm comfortable with lots of schools marketing my program on their platform. And likewise, which gives you then a global sales force as we flesh out the network and as other people do theirs. At the same time, the ability to flesh out, to curate your offerings and say, here are my courses, but I'm going to take those courses from Chicago and those courses from Michigan and those courses from Georgetown, and collectively, we have a compelling solution in our market without spending a fortune on creating those courses. Working together, we actually can solve this market, which is a big deal. Yeah. Yep.
I just have a question. Thank you for all the research you've done about specific conditions at Penn. Just a quick question on just a specific idea. What do you think of the Quaker Consortium? Are you familiar with it?
Consortia in general in higher ed tend to be pretty small and pretty geographic. And those are schools that are kind of sort of competitors. The way you think of a network, the networks that have really won, Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, they're global, they're huge. Your particular network might be small, right? You have your friends, and then those have you and their other friends, and then those people have them and their other friends. So it's like a fractal kind of thing. It's not an association or a group. Everybody's network is different from everybody else's. So I think put it this way, any networking is good. And the student life of the Philadelphia schools is immeasurably improved by various efforts, actually. But we could take that up by a couple of orders of magnitude, especially when we have a specific problem like this one. How do we collectively win in that space? And how do we think of Penn as a lifelong thing, not as a four-year thing? So in general, I think networks are the solution to a lot of problems. And they are not, I'm sorry, I'm just getting over a cold. They are not associations, and they're not state systems that are top down. And if you really explore how networks work, there's joy to be had there. So that's on non-degree. On degree side, I put it to you that undergrad has been flat here for a decade. Graduate has grown, and the engineering school in particular, enrollment has grown. And you're now at a crossroads. I am getting inbound calls from elite schools literally every week now, as schools say, wow, I have to hedge against research money going down, and I need more tuition revenue. I think you're going to see a whole bunch of schools get much more serious about scale in their programs and in their graduate programs in particular. It's good to be Penn. It's going to be really tough to be just a little bit less prestigious like a Villanova, because you guys are a tough competitor. I believe you can be just about as large as you want to be on the one hand. And it's a real question, how much do you want to grow? On the other hand, that competition dictates that you really look at the quality of your materials and the quality of the programs and the quality of your marketing efforts, because everybody's upping their game. And the question is, there's upside here, and I think there's downside, but this is going to play out in really interesting ways really over the next 3 years. When I talk about online, though, it's not about online. So Apple stores, when they came out, a lot of us thought that they were cute, that they were like showrooms and really adorable. And they are today the highest grossing stores per square foot in the country, by 50% over Tiffany, by 100% over whoever's number 3 today. They're insanely successful as actual businesses. And the question is why? And I'd put it to you that they're really thoughtful about what do you do online dealing with Apple, and what do you do in the store? When do you go to the store? What is its purpose? And there are a couple of universities starting to get to understand that an online program and a non-ground program, they're not different things. There's just students. It turns out most online students are half-time. In graduate, they're domestic. Most on ground is full-time and largely international. So there are different subpopulations that are more popular in, that choose one over another. All of them, though, see themselves as a community. And how you think about getting people here, maybe the online students don't want to come in and spend an hour commute to take a class, but maybe they want to come for a cocktail party and a guest lecture. How you think about getting them to campus every week where possible, or every month where not mandated, but welcomed, is, I think, a differentiator and something really important. Home Depot doesn't care when you buy the hammer, if you buy it online or if you buy it in the store. They don't care if they deliver it to you or if you pick it up. You're just their customer, and they're doing whatever you need right now. And I think that notion of agility is coming down the pike, and we should really steer to it. Crazy idea that I wanted to throw in, and I'm cognizant of time. But imagine that you wanted to do something big. So imagine we created a new online undergraduate school. We don't call it Penn. It's Quaker U. It's P2. It's something that is an affiliated brand, but it's not the same brand. It's really inexpensive. It's meant for disadvantaged kids. It's totally online, $5,000 a year. Your faculty creates the courses. Oh, and by the way, they're not a fuzzy interdisciplinary study kind of degree. Like, they are pathways to a good job. And your faculty creates the courses and your students do the TA work. And we're together putting on a show, together educating 30 or 40,000 disadvantaged kids every year and driving them to really interesting jobs and opportunities wherever we want. It's the kind of thing that technology is made for. And it's the kind of thing that Penn could do. And actually, even at $5,000 a year, it pays for itself. So there's an upfront cost, and then you've got something that's sort of self-sustaining. If you're worried about an increased tax on endowment, the note is adding 30,000 or 40,000 students a year changes the profile of endowment per student in a way that probably brings you under a line. But I'm not doing this as gaming tax law. That's my next idea. I'm doing it because I think there's an opportunity to use the brand and the smarts of Penn to do enormous social good. So here's the other idea. I just want to just put in your mind, and this is less about technology. I think this administration has made it clear that they are not your friend. And the question for higher ed in general is, how do we move from a defensive crouch, even working together, to a much more offensive position? How do we counter? How do we push back? And my idea is to internationalize. What if Penn merged with U Toronto or with Cambridge or Oxford? What if you did exactly what all of the for-profits have done, which is become multinationals? Not a little campus in Dubai, but a real effort to sit astride countries and not be American. And I just want to put it to you, I thought of Toronto because Canada's in a feisty mood and would be a good ally, but I think there are other countries who are pretty excited too. Right now, we're facing an exodus of researchers and other smart people. I think that an aggressive move to become global, as the endowment moves offshore, we can play the same sort of tax games that the for-profits play. B, we can, if necessary, move research offshore or researchers offshore, depending on immigration and funding. And C, I believe that there are countries that are pretty excited about the notion of stepping up their game. But I hear you, there are a lot of countries that can't imagine funding research the way we do, and they won't play, right? But it's fair. In any case, it's just a bonus idea, and I've been talking about it with some universities, and I think there's a moment here where having a counter position is going to be actually helpful to higher ed.
One thing that I was curious about is the idea of the $5,000 a year, 30,000 students. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that this is an idea that when you get the chance, if there are other schools to speak to, I'm sure you might, pitch them this idea as other schools as well. What would the world look like if all the top tiers and top tier schools end up doing this? How does the world shake out?
The world would be way better. Look, I mean, good information crowds out bad information. Before elite schools went online education were the for-profits, and they were a joke. Like, look up SNL skits about online learning from back in the day, and they were a joke because those schools are terrible even on ground. They're just terrible schools. University of Phoenix had a 3% graduation rate online, 3%. Like, they were marketing companies that did a little bit of teaching. Once real schools stepped in, the enrollment at the for-profits went down by 3/4. In the same kind of way, as better schools get serious about doing something really good to service those students, I think a lot of really not very good schools will either up their game or go away.
And when you look at the value proposition for an online learning experience, some of it, obviously all these elite institutions have unbelievable faculty, deep expertise in the traditional way of educating. But if moving to an online world, there are different ways to deliver the content. And as you mentioned before, there's how much can you AI assist the student services and the academic and learning. So when you look at these elite institutions, it's not just the embedded knowledge that exists in the institution, but it's also how well they're able to deliver in this new world. I mean, when you think of the value proposition for an online learning experience, how much is established and how much needs to be developed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to draw a distinction. When Penn does online education, it has to do it as well as on campus. It'll be different, but it should be great. You should head high that those students are getting absolutely a top-notch experience. This isn't Penn, right? This is Quaker U. Right. And we can't afford to give a Penn experience at $5,000 a year. It can't be done. So we're going to make accommodations and give them a really good $5,000 education in the same way that, there are refrigerators that cost $10,000 and there are fridges that cost $800. And actually, the $800 refrigerators generally need less maintenance. Like, they work fine and they keep everything cold. we can do an $800 refrigerator.
If we end up doing, if these elite institutions end up coming up with that $5,000 solution, you know, one comment you made was, well, it's for disadvantaged kids, kids that may not have the resources.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as you look at the way that technology plays out in our world, volume leads to quality improvements, and you know, there's that Kaizen, continuous improvement. Why would that $5,000 learning experience not eventually be better than the more elite offering?
You know, ASU, which isn't 5,000 by any means, but that's sort of their point. We can be large. In being large, we can, you know, they would argue they have more, in their honors program, they have more people with like perfect SAT scores than any Ivy. But it's not the same. I am utterly unworried that that the problem for Penn is going to be some really inexpensive online program. Like, it's just a different animal. What the problem for a lot of schools might be. I look at the higher ed landscape, and I got to tell you, the community colleges are generally not good. There are some good ones, but they're really vulnerable in a way that that actually most four-year schools are not. So could they have an existential problem for an online-only, against an online-only provider? I think so, but.
But as you play this out, you know, I remember years ago, I don't know if it's still the case, but the #1 course at Yale, you know what the #1 course at Yale used to be? Harvard CS50.
Yes.
Okay, so that the Yale determined it was no longer capable or proficient of teaching entry-level CS, so it outsourced that to Harvard. Why does the world need more than one great differential calculus professor?
You know, the Gates Foundation and others have walked down that road. I think it's a dead end. There is an arc to a curriculum done right. Your Penn is not a collection of courses. And if it is, that's something to fix.
Right.
So the question, and it has to do with what's in the classroom and everything around it. If I asked the people here who finished college, I ask all the time, what % of what you took away from college happened in the skills and knowledge in the classroom? I don't know, what would be your answer?
What % took
Your college experience, what % of what was important about it?
10%, 15%, 20%.
Yeah.
A small percentage.
So the arc of...
Vijay, I never had you as a professor.
Well said. The arc of a great university, I think, is just different. And actually, San Jose State tried a thing with Stanford years ago, where they took a Stanford course, gave it in lieu of their own, and it was a disaster. Because it's just a different audience. They walk in with different things, they expect a different level of support, and I don't think we could do with one good differential calculus course.
So a lot of your career, most of your career, I guess 25 years at the Princeton Review, right? And a lot of that was helping students get proficient at some of these exams in order to get into college, right? So a lot of your career was spent trying to help students get into college,
Yep.
right? And now your career is different in terms of what you're trying to deliver. How would you frame the evolution of what students are looking for today versus what they were looking for earlier in your career?
Well, here's a crazy fact. Just survey last week, 33% of kids looking at a school right now are actively looking at how the university is applying AI in its curriculum.
Wow.
Like that's an important criteria now, out of 0% 2 years ago. So the answer changes.
Right.
But higher ed gets hit in weird ways. Like half the time you hear people say, you know, you're not preparing people for the careers and for jobs. And that's the problem with higher ed is what you're teaching is irrelevant. And then the other half the time, people note that the gap between college educated and non-college educated has been growing substantially every year since like 1975. And the return on investment for college continues to rise, not fall. And they say college used to be how we leveled the playing field, and now it's, it's expensive and wealthier kids are getting it and they're getting an insurmountable advantage. And in a sense, you can't have it both ways. Right? You got to pick a lane to criticize higher ed. Are we too good at prepping people for the workforce, or are we not good?
Would you segment that response on whether it's a STEM, studying STEM or not studying STEM?
No, in fact, according to Georgetown's research, liberal arts majors are second only to engineering in terms of return on investment over time. They outperform almost every other major. They underperform for the first decade, and then they steadily blow by everybody else. As you need those skills, the critical reasoning skills, the communication skills, the collaboration skills, more and more as you rise in the workforce, you have them.
So when I talk to other parents and we talk about, we are all using AI in different ways, to the mundane to the large in our lives. A lot of parents may say, you know what, I'd rather my son or daughter be an electrician or a plumber, something where they can't get disintermediated, where AI is not going to have an impact. What advice would you give those people?
It's always possible. There's always a first. Up to literally today, every improvement in technology, people have said this is going to eliminate all the jobs, and it didn't work out that way. We have 3% unemployment today. Maybe robotics and AI will put us all out of work, but I'm not betting that way, and I certainly wouldn't bet that way with my kids' education. This stuff, like when we use, for instance, AI in working with the schools we work with, it's never a replacement for people. It's like a three-way conversation. So you're the professor, and you're Professor Jim, and you've got Professor Jimbot. And so somebody asks you a question, and Jimbot steps in and says, I think I can answer that question. A, because it's been paying attention as you answered that question 4 times already, but B, it has access to the full curriculum and to all the curriculum materials. It says, this might be a thing, but it's a three-way conversation. And then the professor, maybe somebody asked it at 3 in the morning. Another professor gets up and says, let me add some color to that, and tweaks the answer. At which point, A, the bot steps back because now the professor's engaged. It would be a really annoying assistant if every single time that anybody said anything, it stepped in. But B, it goes back to the professor later in the day that said, should I give that answer to everybody? Is that useful, or is that just kind of a one-of? And so it's learning all the time, and it's learning the voice and the, and sort of the affect of that professor, and just being a good way to service students better, but it gives the professor hopefully more time to engage them more deeply, as opposed to, we don't need a professor anymore. And you just go right across the landscape, and there's just an amazing opportunity to just make us better.
One thing you mentioned before was that the distinction between online master's programs is predominantly U.S. mid-career, someone home, whereas on campus is typically someone from outside the U.S., right? So that dynamic has existed for a while. Given what is going on in D.C. as it relates to colleges, do you think that and you said your phone's ringing off the hook with companies that want to do this. Do you think that
with schools?
Yeah, I meant with schools that are sort of saying we need a different strategy. I think Penn Engineering has done a lot and is down the road trying to do that. So just going back to the competition question, you said right now U.S. education is traditional institutions are 1% of the online after After
After degree.
undergrad,
Right.
right,
And I'm really talking about non-credit.
non-degreed, okay.
Yeah, so when you look at lifelong learning, like the size of the non-degree certificate space is now larger than the graduate school space. And that's not at the expense of graduate school. Graduate school still has real importance, but it's the ongoing learning. And that's, by the way, you look at teachers and ongoing teacher education. It's $20 billion a year. None of it's from higher ed. You look at lawyers, continuing legal education,
Right.
continuing medical education. Go down the road and find me an area where the key producer, the key teacher is higher ed, and it's tough to find.
So now we have about, I think, 60 or 70 people watching online, no, ironically, watching online, as well as people in the audience. There are some students in the audience who want to pursue a career in ed tech. What advice would you give to those students?
Number one, if I look at an ed tech company, and back when everybody was in the office, you could do it in about 20 seconds of just walking around the office, poking around. You're a higher ed person or a K-12. You're a B2B, companies that work with schools, or B2C, companies that serve students. There have been no successful companies in the past 100 years that tried to do both, that tried to do any two of those four quadrants. So you gotta think about it. What do you like to do? What's the problem you want to solve? And number two is within those companies, there is the product side. How do I build things that are great? Then there's the marketing and recruiting side, or marketing and sales. And then finally, there's sort of back office. Back office is the same whether you're making donuts or doing ed tech. But those are the two areas.
So find your function. Find the function that you have a passion
Find the
for.
market, find the function, and focus.
Great. So just want to open it up if there are any people in the audience who want to ask questions. You are very good at asking questions. Is there anyone else before we get back to you? Go for it. Mike? Yeah.
So thank you. That was very thought-provoking. As Richard had mentioned, we feel that we're very far along in the online education space as it relates to master's programs currently. Mm-hmm. And we're really trying to find our place with the lifelong learning market, the non-degree lifelong learning market. And that's a startling number, over $100 billion. And to know that universities only have 1% market share is also pretty jaw-dropping. So I did a little chat GPT iteration here to understand who are the other kind of segment owners, who are the suppliers. And it appears to be online learning platforms, corporate training, and there's other various categories. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about if we want to access more of that market? How does a university or a school like Penn Engineering offer a differentiated, cost-effective menu of offerings at scale? What advantages do you think a school like ours could have over your edX or your 2U or your online service provider? So it'd be great.
You have to collaborate. So imagine for a minute that you said, we're going to be a great provider to engineering firms. Let's pick a lane, right? To a mechanical engineer, say aerospace, like it doesn't matter. The first question is, what do they need? What are they buying right now? What are the different needs of different people there? What you're going to find is that some part of it is actual engineering, some part of it is probably management. You've got a brilliant engineer, but now they start managing people and they have no training in that at all. So how you collaborate with Wharton, how you collaborate with enough providers, enough schools, that when you go in, you have a solution. You're not selling like aftermarket steering wheels. You're not selling like a little piece of the puzzle. You're selling, I can help you in a profound way raise the quality of your workforce. And And doing that alone is just too expensive, and it's worse than too expensive. People have heard of evergreen content, right? Some, course on medieval poetry, and the markets, the body of material is not changing very, very quickly. Everything in engineering is never green.
Right.
By the time you're teaching it, the clock is ticking. So your need to keep whatever courses you have, to keep changing them, to keep evolving those courses, it's just too expensive to do all of them. And that's if you're good at everything to begin with. And Penn might be one of the few engineering schools that is, but it's just too big a lift. So I really believe that the only way it's going to happen is figuring out your network.
I got a slide. Can you put the slide up? Is that possible? If you can't do it, it's okay. You gave a talk at ASU, and you had a slide with Bones wearing a helmet of the instantaneous educational, being able to educate someone instantly. You said, how much would you pay for it? But you never answered the question. How much would you pay for it? Can you describe what it was?
Sure. Wow. So it's a thought experiment. Let's say for a minute that you pay $40,000 or $50,000 to get a master's in AI. And somebody comes out, you come out, with a helmet that I put on the helmet for 1 minute and a little zap, and I have learned all the skills and all the content that master's teaches.
Without having to spend that year.
I didn't spend, I took 40 seconds. Yes. How much would you charge for a zap of your helmet? Right, so you're competing against a $50,000 degree. That is more than $50,000 because it's a year of your life, right? So with opportunity costs, call it 150 or more. And it costs you, the marginal cost is, 30 cents of electricity. How much would you charge?
And you never answered the question.
Well, let me ask it first of you guys. Would you charge, how many people here, just think of your number for a minute. How many people would charge less than $1,000?
Show of hands.
How many would charge less than $10,000? How many would charge between 10 and 50?
Charge or pay?
No. Your marginal cost is nothing. This is
Or the producer.
This is your fee to students.
Are you making a profit or are you making a difference? That's the question I'm asking.
Whatever you
You
want.
can answer it your own way.
How many people would charge between 10 and 50?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
How many would charge over 50 because with opportunity cost, you're still providing something great? Really interesting. So I've asked that question of a lot of people, and my answer is people who do ed tech for a living and educators in general see this as a public good. And we would work hard to sell this thing for under 50 for 25 or less. We're doing right, we're getting our research money back and then some, but we've actually lowered the cost of teaching. But investors and that whole segment, their answer is more like yours. It's 100K plus. And yeah.
So missing in all of this are the connections that you make, the network,
Mhm.
the social network that you develop. So I don't know exactly whether that knowledge is really benefiting me, because a lot of it is who do I know and how do they know what I know?
I think your students are here for both. So yeah, you are not getting that, but remember, online students, average age 28, they have a job, they have a network, they are evolving their network, and you're right, Penn adds more, but you're still going to get the name of Penn, it's still going to be on your LinkedIn. You're going to lose the social learning. and you're going to lose the network. But you're going to save a year of your life. So yeah, it's a different product.
Yeah, but if we're looking at higher education for people who want a page and want to be proficient in something, is it just about content downloading, and therefore what difference could you do with just watching YouTube versus doing projects and homeworks and all that to get the practice in?
I kind of think of it as a spectrum. Kindergarten is entirely about socialization. PhDs are mostly about the knowledge and skills, like over 50%. First year of undergraduate is about socialization. College overall is somewhere in the middle, undergrad, right? It's all kind of on a line. And my thought experiment isn't about addressing that, but the whole way we think about higher ed is that, like, how do we maximize for online learners all of the networking, all of the emotional energy that you get in this building, and I think it's a really hard and a really engaging question. It's like it keeps me going, but yeah, the helmets. To make this an easier question, the helmet also gives you that. It also gives you the network, because I'm not trying to hit that. I'm trying to hit why are we here, and how much of learning should be hard, and how do you charge for something like that? Because I think there are advances in education and ed tech. Like collectively, both the foundations over here, the Gates Foundation in particular, and the ed tech community over here, I don't think we've made education better, either K-12 or higher ed. I don't see any metrics that say the world is way less expensive or way more effective as a result of all of those technologies and all of those investments. This is a hard nut.
We have time for one more question. I promised I would get back to you, which I'm doing now.
Thank you so much again for this talk, for all the fielding of questions. I have a maybe perhaps provocative question, which is, you might be familiar that one of the campaign promises of the current administration was this project called American University. So American University was this project of making this free online university funded on the tax on endowments that would be sort of a leveler of education and a competitor for legacy universities. I'm curious, what do you think of that? Because it sounds like it fits a lot into your project. Thank you very much. And thank you for the question.
It's not going to happen. So it's hard to think about it much. There is nothing that the federal government has done in education to suggest that they could do that any more effectively than they've done a bunch of things. I'm actually, as horrified as I am about things like cutting cancer research in order to punish a school for a swimmer, I think losing the Department of Ed is probably a good move. Like, I don't think the world's gotten better for its existence. So it's not the right place to do this. Penn is the right place to do this. Coming out of a humanitarian impulse by a community that isn't trying to punish anyone or kind of mess around, it's just saying, let's do something great, I think is how you build something great.
Great. John, thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.